Welcome everyone, and this is of course the animation that you're gonna learn how to make. The animation itself is not that hard, we're just gonna download it from a website called Mixamo, and that is this one here, Mixamo or Mixamo, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but in this website you can first have to log in, create an account, and then you can select a character. And in this case, I just chose a very simple character because then the kind of shading that we're creating just shows the best with a very simple character. But you can just choose any character that you would like, right? If you want a more of a complex character, you are of course always just able to, you can just click on any character that you want, use this character, and the animation will normally work. You can also change animations. So if you go to animations, and here you can choose an animation. So maybe we want capoeira here. And here we can see that this character does this capoeira. So you can also do the step width, posture, play around with the overdrive, arm space, and all that shebang here. Let's just do step width. Maybe we want him to step a little bit less wide. And here you can see how that works, right? So very cool. And once you're happy with your animation, you can just click on download. And then you can choose your format. I personally do like FBX here. With skin, then you also download the skin, the whole character that you can see. And then of course we can do frames per second. In my case, I just did 24, but you can choose for 60 or 30 as well. And I'm not going to use any keyframe reduction. Then you can click on download. So here inside Blender, you can just click on File, Import, and you can import FBX. And now we can select the model or the dance that you have exported. So in this case, it was this one. And here we have it. So if I click on play, you can see that it just animates or just does the animation like it does on the Mixamo website. You can also see all these keyframes already attached. So that's perfect. It's just done. Now, what do we need to create that cool shading look? Well, first I just want to show you kind of what that look is. It is just a refractive kind of shader. So I'm just gonna hide this armature for right now, and I'm gonna make two different kinds of materials. I'm just gonna do a plane for right now. You guys don't have to do that, but you could already create this material as well, okay? So just click on shading, click on new. What we're gonna do here is we're going to add a wave texture. Color goes into the base color of the principal shader, and I will use a color ramp just so I have more control about this texture, okay? So linear goes to constant, and then if I drag this last anchor a little bit to the left, you can see that we have very straight lines instead of that more smooth look that the linear or B-spline would create. So now we have these lines. Very cool. If I now go to my cube, make sure I move it a little bit up, and create a material for this material we can just rename to, let's do index of refraction, so IOR, shader or texture, whatever, just IOR is fine enough. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna make sure the transmission of this principled shader is all the way to 1, and the roughness goes lower. The problem is we are inside Eevee, so we cannot really see what is happening, even if I go to the rendered viewport shading. Right, so we are going here into rendered engine cycles. Make sure we are using our device GPU, unless your CPU is better, but normally use GPU. And performance can go to 256 by 256, and this just creates bigger tiles. Now we have an kind of a glass material, and depending on how the glass is made or what material is made for the glass, the index of refraction will work differently. So to create this cool effect, you can actually play around with this IOR, and these kind of lines that we have here will change just because the light kind of refracts differently inside this kind of material that we have. So with a cube, it's kind of hard to see, especially if you have very sharp corners. But if you look from the side here, you can see that the light would fall in here, but now there's a little bit of a dip from where we are gonna see this texture, right, inside this cube. If I put this IOR just to 1, it would just line up perfectly. But I can also move it up way more, and you can see that we get more and more distortion. So for the cool thing is that for every object that you create, let's say the sphere in this case, make it smooth, and you just give the same material, so IOR, you can see that also the index of refraction works differently for this one. So it's depending on the shape and the kind of material that you use. And here we can just play around with the IOR just to see what looks cool. I really like how spheres look here, and that is also kind of why I chose a character in this case. Because if we use a character, let me unhide the skin and give this material to the character, you can see that the character is kind of a smooth shaded anyway. So we get a very much this effect that we can see here, right? So that is literally just whatever we need to do. But if we look at the environment that we created in our finished render, you can see that the environment is just a very bland normal color. And you're of course not confined to just make this a white color, but everything that's being refracted is being refracted from somewhere else. And that is because I created a huge sphere around here, and that sphere is only possible to see through this character. So let's do that also in our scene. What we can do here is we can delete this plane for right now and just add a sphere. So just do a UV sphere and scale this all the way up. Let's click on right click and do shade smooth, and I personally also like to give it a subdivision surface. Now, if you click on 0, you will be inside of the sphere. If not, you can just scale the sphere even up a little bit more, but make sure that once you go inside your camera, you can actually see what is ever inside of this scene. So we kind of create a whole world around our scene, right? Let me move my camera a bit close to the character. So view, camera to view, just move it a bit closer. And here we have our character. Awesome. So once you select this huge sphere around here, you can just give this the wave texture that we created before. And instead of using the principled shader, I actually would like to use an emission shader. So just emission goes into the surface and color goes into the color of the emission shader. And here you can choose any color that you like. If you like black and white, you can do black and white. If you want more of a PewDiePie kind of theme, you can go black and red, right? So now we have this, quite decent looking background, and also the reflections are working, right? The refractions actually in this case. But we don't really have a floor or anything like that yet. So we are going to create just a cylinder in this case. And I want this character to come kind of out the cylinder like it's going to on a stage or whatever. So in this cylinder, I am going to delete this top face and this bottom face as well. We don't really need it. So what we can do now is we can just create a little podium. Just extrude this inwards, extrude downwards, somewhere around here, and move this podium a bit down. Now add a bevel and a subdivision surface. This bevel I would like to put a few more segments, and then the amount can go way smaller, okay? Right click, shade smooth, and here we have a decent looking little tube where our character can go out of. We can of course also scale this a little bit, just so our character doesn't really go inside of this model. We don't want that. And we of course also need a cylinder for this little guy to stand upon. So I just select this whole edge loop with Alt and then left click, then Shift D, right click, then it snaps back, but I can still do P and then separate by selection. So what we can do now is we can hide the sphere and we can start to create the world where our little guy is gonna dance upon, right? So in my case, I chose just something very, very simple. I chose a cylinder, and the cylinder I want to have as a cap fill triangle fan. And I will go to 1, which is just the front view, so I can move the cylinder down, okay? I want this guy to dance upon it, but I don't want it to go inside of it, right? So somewhere around here seems to be fine. And then for almost every model that I want or that I create, I normally use a bevel modifier and a subdivision surface, at least if it's kind of more of a hard surface model, right? We can use a shade smooth in here as well, and I like to apply the scale. So now we can play around with these segments. So maybe put the segments a bit higher. And of course, also play around with the amount here. So maybe a segment of 4. Amount like this seems to be fine. And then we have our subdivision surface at 1 in local viewport and render 2, which is, kind of normal. Now, this guy is going to dance on here. And if you get your timeline, you can actually see if you like what is happening. So go to 0 and see that he doesn't step outside of this. Maybe you need to make the cylinder bigger, or maybe you want it smaller. That is all up to you, but mine seems to fit quite well. And of course you can choose how long you want this animation to be, but in my case, maybe 260 will be fine. Yeah, but that's all up to you guys. Now, I like to duplicate this, and with this duplicate, so I'm gonna hide the first one, and this duplicate, I'm going to delete the bottom faces, and then go to the top view, and actually delete 1/2 of this, which is gonna be this part. And here I can extrude this downwards, and this is going to be, yeah, I guess I can better show you. Whenever the animation starts, we have these kind of doors opening up. Then the guy comes on the cylinder where this is standing upon. And then, of course, everything goes down again. And this creates our loopable animation. Let's go back here and actually create these two pieces. So this is the first piece. Then we can just duplicate it. So Shift-D, rotate Z 180. And now we have our duplicate. And I want to go back to my normal main cylinder, and I'm going to duplicate it again, then hide off all of these other cylinders. And with this duplicate, I'm just gonna hide or delete this inner vertex on both the top and the bottom. Then delete. Now I'm gonna extrude it, but now I want to scale it up, but make sure I do scale Shift Z, so the Z axis actually doesn't scale, okay? And then move a bit outwards. Like this seems to work great. And then you can apply scale if you think your scale changed. In this case, it didn't change a lot. But this is essentially just this part here, right? So we have these doors, we have this part, and now we need to create a little bit of a gap where these doors can actually go through. So let's do that as well. We're gonna just select our main cylinder here, create an edge loop where we think our doors will be. So with Ctrl R, you can create an edge loop. You can create another edge loop and then select this whole edge loop in the middle with Alt and then just click. And then extrude, scale, Shift, Z again, just outwards. And here we have this little notch in between here. And we can kind of start to renaming these cylinders. Otherwise, it's just, yeah, not really doable. So this is going to be the outer cylinder, maybe. Then this one is door 1 or door 2, whatever you think. So door 2. This one is door 1. And then here we have our, I guess, plateau, dense plateau. So plateau will be fine. So here we renamed everything, and we can move these doors a little bit down. Just whenever we're gonna move them around, they will actually go inside of these notches that we just created. And as last, we need to create a big scene around here, right? So I'm just gonna select my outer cylinder again, select this edge loop only with Alt and then just select, Shift-D, P, and then separate by selection. So here we have just this cylinder. I'm gonna scale it a tad little bit up and then just extrude it, scale it up, extrude it, and then move it up. And here we have our whole studio. I would also like to extrude this part a little bit down. That just creates a nice little gap in between here, which eventually will also create a shadow. So if you like this kind of setup, I encourage you to make it like this. And then I would also create a few modifiers. This already has a bevel modifier, but if we delete it, you can see that we have a very nice and smooth kind of studio. So this outer cylinder 001 in this case is gonna be renamed as studio. Right click, shade smooth, and here we can see that we can add some extra subdivisions if we want to, and we could create some extra just edge loops to make this floor a bit flatter. Otherwise it's very smooth, as you can see here, but you can create an extra edge loop if you would like to. Now, go to your camera view, find a nice position for your camera. So in this case, just I want my little guy to be in camera view. And maybe we want to move the studio a bit up, just so not everything is so cramped. And of course, the guy needs to be visible in the camera at every little dance move that he creates, right? So maybe I need to go a little bit further away here. And this seems to work quite decently. Now, one thing that I see is that this looks a bit weird, so I'm going to add an extra edge loop just inwards here. And maybe also here one, just so I have a nice sharp edge. So how do we start animating this? It's very simple. We just need to first focus on the plateau and this little dance guy. Okay, so you can select the armature and the character, and then the plateau with Control if you want to select it inside of your object drop-down menu here, and otherwise you have to just start to select it here. Then click on Shift H and everything else will be hidden except this. Now, my 3D cursor is here, and I want to add a plane axis, which is an empty. This empty, we could make it a little bit bigger just so I can see where it is. And now I want to parent the armature and the plateau to this empty. So select them both, that is last the empty, Ctrl P, and then set parent to object. Wherever I move this parent, these objects will follow. And the cool thing is also this animation will just keep going wherever I move my empty. So now if we unhide everything, we can start to focus on the position of this empty. We first want our little guy to be not visible, right? So it's gonna start right down here. Then at frame 0, we're gonna create a keyframe at location, but make sure you have your empty selected, right? We only want to do the location of the empty. Now, at frame 30, I want the little guy to be up maybe already. We can still change that later, but maybe that's a cool position. Now, if you have frame 30 selected, move this empty up and then click on I, and then insert keyframe at location. So from frame 0 to frame 30, this little guy will move up. I think maybe that went a bit too quick, so I will do frame 40 in this case. 0 to frame 40, this plateau and guy will move up, and the animation just goes as it's supposed to be. Now, these doors, of course, also need to open and close. So at frame 0, this door is still locked. Both of them actually are. But at frame 10, around frame 10, this little guy's head starts to pop through. So the door already needs to open a little bit. So maybe around frame 30, the doors need to be open all the way. Because further than 30, we will have this plateau coming up, right? So it needs to be all the way open for the plateau to be able to move there. So let's do frame 30, and we're just gonna move this outwards around the y-axis for this case. So y, and then I, location. Let's see if this works. Moves up. And you want to make sure that at every single frame that we have, nothing really goes through each other, right? We don't want any intersection of these models. So this seems to work perfectly. Awesome. Let's try the same for this door handle here. So frame 0 is this location. I already did that, but you can just click on I, location. And then at frame 30, we want it to be as open as the other one. So G, Y, somewhere around here, I, and then location. So now both of these doors will open, and at every single point, there will be no interaction between these models. And that is perfect. Awesome. So now at the end of your frames, or at the end of your animation actually, we want this to all close again. So first this guy has to go down. So I'm just gonna duplicate this 40 frame. So just select it. When it's orange, you can click on Ctrl C, and then around frame 220, I'm gonna paste my animation. So Ctrl V to paste it. Make sure your mouse is actually on the timeline, otherwise it doesn't really do it always. Then I'm gonna select this 0 keyframes here, and then copy it with Ctrl C, go to frame 260 and click on Ctrl V to paste this. So now you can see that everything happens, but then the opposite, right? And we also can do this for the doors that we have. So if you select these doors here, copy this first animation, which is at 30 frames. So we go back from 260 to 230, which is here. Control V, and then you can copy this 0 here, go to frame 260 and paste it. We can do the same for this other door. Copy this 30 frame around here. And then this 0 frame, copy it and put it at 260. And here we can see a little animation going. Doors open, plateau if the little guy comes through. He starts dancing for a certain amount of frames. You guys can choose how long. And then everything happens in reverse. So the guy falls down with the plateau, and then the doors close behind him. And now this animation is a loop. Even though his animation, like his dancing animation, doesn't loop, because we don't see him at any point anymore and the doors open up again, it's a full loop, which makes a loopable animation. Awesome. So make sure that he still fits at any point inside of this camera. I think I'll move my camera a little bit more up. Looks more interesting. Goes up. He dances a little bit. And then goes down around here. And this seems to work perfectly. Awesome. So now we can just save it for a second. And then we can start with our shading. So let's take a quick look at our materials. For this studio and every single model that we just created, we do not have a material. And I will just want to keep it very simple. So I'm just going to click on new and just do basic material. And that's done, right? I'm okay with this principled shader, just normal setup. But I want to apply it to all of these models that we just created. So you can just select a model and then just give it the basic material. Material. So let's hide them. And then of course also want these doors to have that material. Basic material. And then this door as well. And I think everything right now has that basic material. And that's perfect. Now though, if we look at the rendered viewport shading, we can see that we get a lot of light from this whole sphere. And our little guy actually doesn't really reflect those lines, right? We just get the reflection from the studio and all of these other cylinders that we just added. So what we need to do here is we're going to select first the big sphere, then go into the object properties, go to visibility, and I want to make sure my diffuse and glossy can go off. Because this diffuse and glossiness is not being reflected on any of the other models, these models will still have just the normal white color instead of the kind of pinkish or red color that we just saw, right? But I still cannot see these lines in this particular model, right? In the little dancing guy. And that is because we need to select all the new models that we created. So in this case, let's just do the studio first. And then make sure the ray visibility transmission is off. So now this model will not detect the transmission from this studio. And we will see kind of the background which is hidden behind it. So now we actually do get all of these cool shapes. And we could do that for every single one of these models. So just select them, ray visibility, transmission will be off for all of them. And also these doors here, right? So transmission off and this one off. So now we have a perfectly nice white background in this case. You guys can choose whatever you want as background. But because we created a wall sphere around here and we have added this material, we still can see our cool index of refraction kind of effect, right? So here, this little guy dances and we still have all the colors. Amazing. So I'm going to save it again. And now we can start to render. So make sure your camera is, so we cannot really see the background. So I made my studio high enough, let's say, and then we can start to render. So for render, I like to go to the output properties, make a new folder. So I go here into the output, create a new folder, and this new folder, we can just rename to output render. And then maybe that's a tryout for you guys, or it's already a final render. Who cares? Select that. Accept, and now you can see that underneath the output, actually every single image that you're gonna save here is gonna go towards there. I personally do render with PNG, and that's just because I like to compile my whole animation inside of Premiere Pro. Like I like to throw all of these single frames in there. But if you want to go TIFF, that's totally fine because you have a bit more color information, right? So in this case, I will keep it this. Could go up with the color depth as well. But whatever you're going to do now, if you're going to render, animation, every single file that's going to be rendered here will actually be rendered or will end up in that folder that you just created, right? So you can also choose now like, do I have a good lighting? Because we actually did not add any lights. And that is, I will just keep that all up to you guys. But of course, you can just place some point lights or create some planes with an emissions, to get some cool lighting in here. But that's all up to you guys. I don't think we should go too much into depth here because you guys can already see how we can create this cool effect, how we can create a white background, but the sky still has these amazing, shading. And I hope you guys learned from this. I hope you guys can kind of apply this to some cool projects of yours. And I would love to see them on Instagram or whatever. And please, subscribe and like if you actually learned something from this. And if you didn't, then just leave a huge dislike. That's also fine. Okay, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.